Pirates Alley, the ghost of Jean Lafitte, haunts New Orleans. The pirate who saved New Orleans in 1815 never left. His ghost still walks the alley where he met the governor and the bar where he drank. Long before the United States claimed sovereignty over the mouth of the Mississippi River, before Andrew Jackson became a president, before the War of 1812 turned a backwater swamp city into a strategic prize worth fighting for, Jean Lafitte controlled the Gulf of Mexico. He commanded a fleet of privateers operating from Barataria Bay, smuggling goods through the tangled waterways south of New Orleans, and moving contraband through a city that officially condemned him while privately relying on what he provided. He was the most famous pirate in American history, a man whose reputation exceeded his crimes, whose charisma allowed him to move through New Orleans society despite his profession, and whose strategic importance to the city ultimately trumped every legal objection the authorities might have raised against him. When the British fleet approached New Orleans in December 1814, it was Jean Lafitte who provided the powder, the shot, and the experienced gunners that allowed Andrew Jackson to mount the defense that saved the city. The Battle of New Orleans, fought in January 1815, turned the pirate into a hero. It also turned him into a ghost. The narrow passage behind St. Louis Cathedral, known as Pirates Alley, runs from Jackson Square to Royal Street, a corridor of worn stone and wrought iron barely wide enough for two people to pass without touching. By tradition, this alley is where Jean Lafitte met Governor William Claiborne during the negotiations that preceded the Battle of New Orleans. The pirate and the governor, standing in the shadows behind the church, working out the terms of an arrangement that would bring Lafitte's men into the defense of the city in exchange for pardons and legitimacy. The meeting never appeared in official records. The governor could not formally acknowledge that he was negotiating with a wanted criminal, but the city needed what Lafitte could provide, and Lafitte needed the harbor that New Orleans controlled. The arrangement was made. The battle was won. Lafitte disappeared into the Gulf in the 1820s. His body never recovered. His fate never confirmed. The alley remained. The apparition associated with Jean Lafitte has been documented in two primary locations within the French Quarter. The first is Pirates Alley itself, where witnesses walking through the passage between the Cathedral and the Cabildo report encounters with a tall male figure dressed in a dark coat, standing in the shadows near the cathedral wall or near the entrance to Royal Street. The figure appears solid, distinct, and corporeal until the moment of approach, at which point it vanishes without movement or transition. The second location is Lafitte's Blacksmith shop bar on Bourbon Street, a structure dating to approximately 1722 and recognized as the oldest bar building in New Orleans. The building served as a blacksmith shop during Lafitte's lifetime, a legitimate business operation that also functioned as a front for smuggling activities. The bar that now occupies the building bears Lafitte's name, acknowledging the historical connection between the pirate and the location. Staff working late shifts at the blacksmith shop report encounters with a tall, dark-coated figure appearing near the bar or in the corners of the room during the hours after closing, when the building is empty and the lights are dimmed. The figure vanishes when approached or when the observer looks away. The consistency of the description across independent accounts is the most compelling feature of the haunting. Witnesses separated by decades with no knowledge of previous reports describe the same apparition in nearly identical terms. A tall male figure, a dark coat, a presence that appears solid and real until the moment it is approached. A disappearance that occurs without movement, as though the figure simply ceases to exist rather than departing through conventional means. The pattern holds across both locations. The apparition in Pirates Alley behaves identically to the apparition in the blacksmith shop bar. The simplest explanation is that both apparitions are the same entity, appearing in the two locations where Jean Lafitte conducted his business in life. Paranormal investigators, who have included both locations in French Quarter investigations, report consistent witness testimony but inconsistent equipment results. Electromagnetic field detectors register occasional spikes in both locations, but the age of the buildings and the density of electrical wiring in the quarter make baseline readings difficult to establish. Audio recordings capture unexplained sounds in the alley, including footsteps on stone and the rustle of heavy fabric, but the proximity of Jackson Square and the constant foot traffic through the quarter introduce contamination into the evidence. Thermal imaging conducted in the Blacksmith shop bar after closing hours shows occasional cold spots near the bar and in the corners of the room, but the building's lack of modern climate control and the presence of multiple exterior doors create temperature variations that complicate interpretation. The most reliable evidence remains the witness testimony, which has accumulated over decades and shows a remarkable consistency of detail despite the independence of the sources. Walking tour through the French Quarter routinely include Pirates Alley as a stop on ghost tour itineraries, and guides report that clients frequently experience unexplained sensations while standing in the alley. A feeling of being watched, a sudden drop in temperature despite the ambient heat of the Louisiana climate, a sense of presence that has no visible source. Photographs taken in the alley occasionally show anomalies, shadow figures appearing in images that showed no visible presence when the photograph was taken. The anomalies appear most frequently near the Cathedral wall, the location where tradition places the meeting between Lafitte and Governor Claiborne. The connection between the historical event and the paranormal activity is not coincidental. Hauntings frequently attach to locations where significant events occurred, where decisions were made that altered the course of history. The meeting in Pirates Alley changed the outcome of the Battle of New Orleans. It brought a pirate into the defense of the city and turned a criminal into a hero. The alley remembers. The staff at Lafitte's Blacksmith shop bar has developed a familiarity with the apparition that borders on casual acceptance. Bartenders working late shifts report that the figure appears with enough regularity that it no longer provokes fear or alarm. The presence is acknowledged, noted, and allowed to continue without interference. The bar is named for Jean Lafitte. It occupies the building where he conducted business. If his ghost chooses to appear in the bar that bears his name, the staff sees no reason to object. The relationship between the living employees and the dead pirate is one of coexistence rather than confrontation. He appears, they acknowledge him, he vanishes. The bar continues its business. The building's age adds another dimension to the haunting. Lafitte's Blacksmith shop bar has been standing since approximately 1722, making it one of the oldest structures in New Orleans and one of the few buildings in the French Quarter to survive the fires that destroyed much of the original city in the late 18th century. The building has witnessed nearly 3 centuries of New Orleans history, absorbing the lives and losses of generations of occupants. The structure itself functions as a repository of memory, a physical object that has been gathering the dead since before the United States existed. Jean Lafitte's ghost is not the only presence reported in the building. Staff and patrons describe encounters with multiple apparitions, unexplained sounds, and objects that move without physical contact. The building is haunted in the plural, a location where the boundary between the living and the dead has worn thin through time and repetition. Jean Lafitte himself remains the most famous of the Blacksmith shop's ghosts, the presence that draws tourists and investigators and gives the location its paranormal reputation. His story provides the narrative framework for the haunting: the pirate who saved the city, the man who operated according to his own rules and bent the law to accommodate his operations, the figure who disappeared into the Gulf without explanation and whose body was never recovered. The absence of a confirmed death creates narrative space for a ghost. If Jean Lafitte's body was never found, if his fate was never confirmed, then his presence in the alley and the bar becomes not a violation of natural law, but a continuation of his life by other means. He is there because he never left. He is there because the alley is where he met the governor and the bar is where he conducted business, and neither death nor time has given him a reason to abandon either location. The haunting presents no danger. Witnesses report no aggression, no hostility, no attempts at communication or interaction beyond the simple fact of appearance. The apparition does not pursue, it does not threaten. It stands in the alley or appears in the bar, visible for a moment, and then it is gone. The behavior is entirely consistent with Jean Lafitte's character in life. He was a man who went where he wanted, did what he chose, and answered to no authority that did not serve his interests. His ghost maintains the same autonomy. He appears when he chooses. He vanishes when he is done. He is not there to frighten anyone. He is there because the locations belong to him and he sees no reason to give them up. No attempt has been made to remove the presence from Pirates Alley or from Lafitte's Blacksmith shop bar. The haunting is part of the location's identity, woven into the history and the reputation of both sites. The alley is named for him. The bar is named for him. It would be peculiar to name a location for a man and then object to his presence in it. The city of New Orleans has always had a complicated relationship with its dead. The cemeteries are cities within the city, the tombs rising above the water table in marble and stone, the dead housed in structures as permanent as the homes of the living. The ghosts walk freely through the quarter, documented and acknowledged and accommodated. Jean Lafitte's ghost is simply one more presence in a city that has never insisted its dead remain buried. Pirates Alley remains one of the most photographed and most walked passages in the French Quarter, a narrow corridor connecting Jackson Square to Royal Street through centuries of history and stone. Tourists pass through it daily, most unaware that they are walking through the location where a pirate met a governor and negotiated the terms of the city's salvation. Some feel the presence, some see the figure in the dark coat. Some walk through and feel nothing at all. The alley does not insist, it simply remembers. Jean Lafitte's ghost is the most swashbuckling haunting in New Orleans, a pirate who bent the rules in life, saved the city from invasion, disappeared into the Gulf without explanation, and came back to stand in his alley and his bar as though his absence had been a brief inconvenience rather than an ending. He is documented, he is consistent, he is there, probably. If you found this case compelling, subscribe to Vanishing Roads for more documented paranormal investigations from around the world. This story was created with AI assistance based on documented case files. All events reference real investigations and reported incidents.